you to the panelists, and we want to open it up now for either quick reactions or questions, and we'll take a few at a time. And if you can stand up and identify yourself.
My name is Adrienne Doherty. My question is for Barnabas. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask you about the Momentum movement and the Orban-Trump bromance and how your movement is dealing with soft authoritarianism in Hungary and how your movement connects to other movements in Eastern Europe or in Southeast Europe regarding soft authoritarianism, which is growing and spreading and obviously linking to neo-Nazi movements. And what do you want to learn from the U.S. As you come here? What do you think about what's going on here? Thank you.
Okay, one or two other questions, and then we'll turn it right over to Barnabas. Any other burning questions? Yes, back there.
This is a question for Professor Schwartz. Kind of a topic or an... Oh, my name is Horacio, and I'm from Pico National Network. One of the topics or arcs that I've seen over this is how to reimagine, through this crisis of democracy, what it means to have some sort of identity, et cetera, et cetera. And in kind of creating this moral vision or empathy or whatever we have this issue with kind of like the palatability of racial justice and whether or not we should actually discuss it. And I'm just wondering, Professor Soren kind of talked about it in the Thatcherite racialization and this inbuilt insularity. If you're white, you don't really have to talk about it. So what does it mean kind of if racial justice isn't seeking anything other than the dismantling of white supremacy, which affects whites, blacks, browns, whatever, how can we reimagine an identity without, addressing it directly?
Hi. I was really happy that Ken Soren brought up big data and Cambridge Analytics, and I just wanted to mention that really dig into the algorithms that different folks use to analyze this data and channel this data, and coming up with left approaches to this kind of stuff I think is really important. And also there are people like followers of Noam Chomsky who are kind of all in that space. And I really think it's worthwhile to engage with a lot of those people in terms of future political campaigns, because at MIT, for example, there's an effort underfoot to actually build a database of every voter in America. And then to begin integrating that database with all these other kinds of big data that Professor Soren is talking about. I just think it's a vital front. The second thing I wanted to say is I'd be interested if anyone has had experience with teaching or engaging in massive online courses. I teach one course that usually a boutique course for grad students called Political Economy and Society. We went from 15 students a semester to 7,500 groups taking the course per semester, and my colleague went from 100 students a semester to 80,000 people taking his course per semester for free. I just think it's a very powerful medium, and I'm just wondering if anyone else has had experience with that.
All right. So these are really three very rich questions. Let's start first with Barnabas.
Okay, so about, can you hear me? Okay. So first about the bromance between Trump and Orban. First of all, I don't think it's a bromance because Orban is nothing. In a sense that he is not important on a global scale. So why Orban might think that he would be important for the policies of Mr. Putin or Mr. Trump, he's actually just a tool, just like a chess piece on the board, and that board is the European Union. So I don't think there's a real board, there's a real bromance. So, and that was one of the reasons why I think, and many other analysts think this as well, is that Orban went in and attacked the CEU. He wanted to provoke a bilateral meeting with Trump because that was the time when Trump came into power, and he thought in these murky times he could have this great opportunity. But as I said, he was not a player, so there was no meeting. And then another, I think there's a really important difference between them, and that difference is your institutions. And it's that Orban managed to successfully dismantle Hungarian institutions, democratic institutions, because they were not strong enough. But as I can see from the past 1 year, your institutions are much stronger. So I don't think America is following the footsteps of Orban, while there are great dangers, of course. The second question was how we deal with soft authoritarianism. I think the most palpable space for that is the media. As I said, we are redecorating billboards because we just cannot, our voices cannot be heard otherwise. And I think it's really important that Orban has, on a Hungarian scale, has nearly unlimited resources. So he is controlling the media like that. So we cannot contest him in the original media landscape. Where we can contest him is social media, because he's so confident that he's not really using it. He has like the addresses of all citizens, basically, so he can, you know, send letters and so. But he's not really using social media. And the other one is in person. You have to be on the streets. You have to go to the smallest village. You have to talk to people. You have to just be there, and people have to see you. So this is the way we actually get in touch with the people, circumnavigating the corrupted media. And then the third question was about other movements. Yes, we are in touch with them. We are in touch with Spain's Ciudadanos, Austria's NIOS, Poland's Nowoczesna, Romania's USR, Slovakia's Progressive Slovakia, and many other parties. And we are, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, we just set up a new framework for Eastern European cooperation on political matters. There is already such cooperation. It's called the V4, the Visegrad 4, between Czech, the Slovaks, the Polish, and the Hungarians. But it became an empty institution, and it's no longer representing the populace, we believe. So we launched this new initiative with these young movements which represent the future.
Yeah, I'll take the question that was directed to me. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, the left always dances around the question of how do you build solidarity and ties of common humanity across differences that shouldn't be obliterated and in some ways, you know, should be recognized and affirmed. You know, I think the black radical tradition has done the best in that the particular emancipation of African Americans has always been tied to the emancipation of all peoples in the United States and often an internationalist vision. I mean, you know, many of you know this, but the '63 March was again for jobs and freedom. You know, King dies fighting for the rights of sanitation workers in Memphis, etc. But it is the question in a way, in that we're a very pluralist society, we're an incredibly segregated society, we're a very racialized and racist society. So how you build that solidarity, but I think there are common human needs and desires, and that's the project of the left. But I do think when Phil talked about if we're overly universal and we sort of posit this one identity that doesn't recognize particular histories, then I think we are asking people to subordinate themselves to the dominant identity. So how you build unity across difference, that's something, you know, I've been writing about and struggling with most of my life. I think that is a huge challenge. But I think ultimately we do believe in a common humanity without suppressing differences.
And Ken, do you want to speak to what Phil raised?
Yes. Cambridge Analytics, as was pointed out earlier, also provided resources for the Brexit campaign in the UK. And a lot of the strength behind Corbyn comes from a group called Momentum.
It's not us.
Not yours.
Clearly not us.
Which has almost tripled the Labour Party membership to about 700,000. So these are people who pay to join the party. The Conservatives, by contrast, have a membership, they keep it secret, like their list of donors, of about 100,000. And this group, Momentum, is mainly comprised of people in their 30s, very social media savvy. In fact, Corbyn campaigns almost entirely through social media, the way that Trump did in this country. So I just agree with you that this is a wave that's that's going to get higher and wider.
And I just want to pick up thank you, if any of the panelists want to address, I think Phil also raised this whole question around online class courses and just kind of people being hungry to engage online.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I'm actually using one such course. I'm learning to code in my free time, just like that. And I think this is a really amazing way to revitalize education. And I also want to connect it with the point raised about Cambridge Analytica, that why they do sound alien, and when we talk about like Cambridge Analytica and we imagine these things, they make sense. They are not that complicated. People can learn about it, and if we mystify them, then it seems like there is this unbeatable enemy using this weird thing. It's actually not that. It's just that it's considering your likes on Facebook, and then based on likes, it sets up a personality profile. So instead of getting advertisement based on your gender and demographics, you get it based on your psychological profile, like whether you're outgoing or you are more reserved. So I think it's really important is just to educate yourself and educate ourselves, and one really good way is these MOOCs. So yeah, just do them.
I guess I'll introduce a slightly dissenting voice. I mean, I think MOOCs are really good to disseminate information and allow people to sort of casually take courses, whatever. But I do think that interaction with other students and faculty really is central to learning the sort of social skills and analytic skills people need. And until Thomas Friedman sends his kids not to Ivy League schools but to just taking MOOCs, then I'll believe that MOOCs are good for everyone. I think residential universities and residential community colleges is what people really need. But that's just my prejudice, and also it's my job, right? So I'm just trying to, all we need is more adjuncts teaching MOOCs to increase the rate of
But Maryland, I'm interested in your take on that same subject.
Excuse me?
Maryland.
On mine? Right. I'm the academic who does not have a PhD. I should just say. So I think it's both, to be blunt. I mean, I think that on one hand, there is a richness that you see having, in the classroom, the interaction both between students and with professors. But I actually think we do need to really think through online and how it reaches more people. I taught a course on labor and social movements, and I was really skeptical about it. I was like, how do you teach something like this? And it's like, this is your life, Schneiderman. I was like looking at all of this. But the back and forth was actually pretty amazing. Between students, like I would throw out questions and challenge them, and really, it was actually pretty interesting. So I'm far less skeptical. And the other piece is, the question is who can come to college, right? And who are we connecting? And so I think there's that whole other piece about we have to keep challenging ourselves about how to connect much more broadly and much more deeply in new ways. And so I'm totally open to figuring this out. I think we have to. I don't know if Phil...
Can I also say you can innovate with this stuff? So
yeah.
I mentioned 7,500 groups. And the reason is because we encourage there to be coaches or trainers or diet facilitators, and that people don't take the courses individually. So we had people in 40 countries taking the courses in groups, and then the groups meet in between. And also we have global Twitter sessions where people from all over the world interact in discussing content. And we are experimenting with having 3 months of face-to-face and the rest of the year online. And so there are a lot of different ways of coming at this. But in terms of a tool for popular education, and it's free, by the way.
That's true.
In terms of a tool for popular education, I just want to, just get people engaged, because I think if we stay outside of it, we're not going to make it useful or better.
And I would say it also, just to add, is it also has this feeling of movement. When suddenly you hear that there's 80,000 other people connected on this, that's something else we have to be able to tap into and inspire and engage more and more people. So anyway, I'm much more open than I was originally, so I'm excited about it. Other questions? A few more. 3 more questions. And we'll see.
Hello, thank you. My name is Nick Brown. I founded a movement called Draft Writing for a People's Party. It's an effort to create a major third party in the United States, Progressive Party. And so my question is, if the Democratic Party remains unwilling to adopt the kind of social democratic policies that most of the panelists that I've heard have agreed and concurred are necessary to defeat Republicans and to hold back a kind of authoritarian populism, then at what point would we kind of embrace the majority sentiment now, reflected by a recent poll from Gallup just last week, that shows that 61% of Americans are now calling for a major third party. Only about a third are content with the existing parties. And that now includes actually a majority of Democrats, people who self-identify as Democrats, who are saying that we need a major third party. So that's my question, is at what point do we reach that tipping point where we say that the Democratic Party, if it's not embracing that perspective, and we agree that that perspective, that social democracy is necessary to hold back the right, the populist right, then when do we consider alternatives?
Well, this is just my personal opinion, but also with many people I work with. I mean, there are open primaries in the United States, right? Anybody can join the Democratic Party. Literally, the Democratic Party at times has had racist fascists in it and communists in it. Sanders was absolutely right to run in the Democratic primaries. If he had run as an independent, he would have at best been Ralph Nader, right? And there is wasted vote syndrome in the United States. You know, you don't want to waste your vote and elect somebody worse. So I would say, I wish we had proportional representation. I wish we had, single transferable votes, etc. But right now, the only feasible thing, if you want to build a third party, it's got to be a trend within one of the two major parties. The Koch brothers are really smart, as well as really horrible, but they abandoned the Libertarian Party because they wanted to have political influence, and God forbid, they've almost taken over the Republican Party. So I think we need more social democratic candidates primarying neoliberal Democrats. That doesn't, and then hopefully the social democratic candidate wins and then defeats the Republican. In conclusion, if and when major constituencies, if the major trade unions in this country call for a Labor Party and major Black and Latino and Asian American and feminist organizations all call for a third party, then we can talk about it. But finally in the United States, you have to become a first party very quickly to survive, because you've got to deliver goods for your constituents, right? So that's the history of third parties. They can have some influence, but I think if you want power, you've got to use the primary vehicle.
Ken or Barnabas, do you want to add in anything?
About this question?
Yes, because you all have done some.
No, not that much. Maybe I think a bit more.
Okay. Two more questions, and this time I will make sure it's two, we won't go back and forth on one. Yes.
My name is Alice Ortuzar, and it's a question about Bernie's campaign. John Lewis very publicly discredited Bernie and said he was nowhere to be seen in the civil rights movement. And after that, there were photos published of Bernie being hauled out. So I'm curious as to what impact that might have had on the black vote. And I just wanted to add to that, there's a lot that Bernie has done, has accomplished, that remains to be talked about. In Maryland, we're just now getting in community land trusts, which seem to be a tool to provide and protect affordable housing in perpetuity. And he established community land trusts when he was mayor of Burlington in the 1970s.
Two other questions to round out the evening. Harold.
No,
Oh.
I just meant one other thing.
Oh, one other, okay. Yes, you got me. One other question. When you think about the entire day, this is it.
This is your list.
This is it.
Should be.
Lawrence McMahon, American educator at the AFT. I'm just wondering if all the panelists could briefly talk about the difference in the economic policies between Trump Thatcherism on the one hand, and then Orban. Tell us more about it, because Trumpism, brings to mind economic protectionism. Thatcherism, obviously, is very free market, and Orban, I don't know as much about it, but maybe you could enlighten us. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on, because of all the obvious similarities between these three things, and yet there's this glaring difference. If you think that difference is significant in any way, or ultimately inconsequential.
Why don't I ask each of the panelists to say if you'd like to say something about that, and then any other final comments. Okay?
Yeah, I would like to.
Yes.
May I go ahead?
Yes,
okay.
please.
So mostly I can talk about Orban's idea. I mean, he seems, for some, he would seem neoliberal because he accepts all these firms, but he has to do so by necessity because Hungary is a really open economy and basically everything comes from export or import, so we have no choice. But in reality, what he's doing is he's nationalizing everything. So it's like he's bringing back the nostalgia of communism that everything put back to own hands, and even by corruption. And the way he succeeds it is that he has these sentiments that every politician is corrupt, but if we are nationalizing, at least we are doing for our guys, for the Hungarians. So then it's right. And then he elevates the field to this level that if everybody is bad, I'm the least bad, and that actually works. When in reality he really accepts these big companies for like this ridiculously low tax rates and extra deals and everything, because he needs that money. Not many talk about it, but Orban's every growth, basically all the growth we had during the past 8 years comes from European Union funds and European and global companies. If we didn't have the European funds, for example, we would be in recession for the last all 8 years. I think 4% of economic growth comes from the EU. So we are reliant so much that he cannot be that openly nationalistic and protectionist, but in reality he is.
I think we need to be a little cautious about pitting an opposition between Thatcher's free trade ideology, supposedly, and Trump's protectionism. There were and there are opportunistic elements which mean that neither could be said to belong fully to those camps. In Trump's case, it's obvious, and we saw this hypocrisy in its fullest form during his Make America Week, where he touted goods made in America, while of course all his clothing line, all his daughter's jewelry and fashion lines are made in China. And Thatcher basically was interested in free trade when it suited her family members. Otherwise, she was very opportunistic about it. If there's one thing about the EU that she didn't like, it was basically its removal of trade barriers, which weakened the remnants of British industry that were left after she put the knife into them.
Yeah, let me briefly address two questions. One is, Sanders did face a real challenge in regards to the older African American vote. I don't think he realized it. He realized it way too late, partly because I think he was so focused on doing well in Iowa and New Hampshire, he really didn't think about South Carolina. But obviously the older black political establishment has very strong ties to the Clintons, both for good and bad reasons. I mean, Clinton certainly wasn't great on a lot of racial justice issues, but he wasn't Reagan, and he was the first Southern president. Well, I guess Carter also wasn't an explicit racist, but the Clintons did have that tie, and also, as Phil Thompson said, I mean, a lot of the younger black political elite is fairly neoliberal, sort of professional, managerial, whatever. But Sanders did win millennial African-American voters. I mean, but he also, he's an old class guy. He's an old leftist. He usually pivots from racial justice issues to the economic aspects of it very quickly. And as we need jobs to end mass incarceration, without really talking at length about the horrors of mass incarceration. And he pivots pretty quickly on women's issues to sort of equal pay for comparable work. And that's fine. I mean, you know, the world historical spirit chose Bernie to carry us, and he did a lot of very good stuff, so who am I to criticize? Who thought he would get 13 million votes? You know, there are people in this audience who know more about trade policy than I do, but my guess is that Trump will jawbone, he'll talk a little about the Chinese currency manipulation or a little about Canadian steel subsidies, but I think ultimately we're such a financialized capitalist country that we're basically into, quote, free trade, which isn't really free. But and whatever he does, he's not going to push a fair trade agenda that's going to lift global labor and environmental standards. So it's either going to be narrow protectionism or it's just rhetoric. I think the other thing is that also I don't think there'll be massive deportation because agribusiness, the hotel and restaurant industry, caregiving among middle class and upper class people is so dependent on immigrant labor. I think our position has to be that anyone who contributes labor to this society immediately or as expedited as possible, they and their dependents should be citizens. If you work here, you should be a full citizen. I mean, I think that's the only progressive position on immigration.
I just want to thank this panel. I want to thank Barnabas, it was great. Joseph and Ken for all their participation and all their wisdom that they shared. And I want to turn this over back to Leo. Thank you all.
So I once was at a panel where someone said, I understand that this was like, a panel that had gone on and it was like 9:30 at night. And she said, I understand that I'm the only person who stands between you and breakfast. So you will not get a long speech from me at this point. What I do want to say very briefly is that the purpose of this conference was to open up a conversation on these questions. We did not have a particular analysis that we had in mind. We actually invited lots of different perspectives and hoped that the beginning of dialogue and conversation among them would be productive. It is a conversation that will continue because the crisis of democracy is not ending. It won't even end when the day comes when Donald Trump is no longer president. I think one thing that's clear from what we've discussed here is that these are forces and dynamics that go deep, not only in American democracy, but throughout the world. And so I thank you for coming and participating in the conversation. I thank you for being the hardy souls who stuck it out to the end. And I look forward to having your participation in this conversation as we continue it.
Be online.
So we have taped it, and we will in due course put it up. So if I know some folks had to miss this piece or that piece, so you'll be able to go online and look at it, or if you think some piece was particularly good, you can refer it to people where they can go and watch it. So thank you, and good day.